In this video, I share my hands-on experience transitioning from the Quest 3 to the Pimax Crystal Light, breaking down the differences you'll actually notice in iRacing, and all from an older gamer's perspective. This video is for anyone who owns a Quest 3 and is thinking of buying a Pimax Crystal Light, or perhaps anyone who is looking at buying either the Quest 3 or the Pimax Crystal Light but can't decide which way to jump. I have owned a Quest 3 since its release date in October 2023, paid for with my own money, and for me, this VR headset ticks so many boxes for my day-to-day sim racing enjoyment and sim flying days that I have often felt there is little point in even thinking about changing to another VR headset, particularly when there are so many other sim racing and sim flying accessories that I have yet to acquire. However, recently, Pimax offered to send me the Crystal Light for review, and I thought, why not? But having said that, I now need to make this short disclaimer.
Already?
Yes, Pimax have sent me the Crystal Light free of charge for review, but they have no input into any of the content of this video, and they will not see it before you do. That out of the way, on with the review. Transitioning from the MetaQuest 3 to the Pimax Crystal Light in iRacing was for me an eye-opening experience, no pun intended. Whilst the Quest 3, when optimized correctly, as I have shown in this video, can deliver an enjoyable and immersive VR experience, the Crystal Light adds an undeniably high level of graphical fidelity that is instantly perceptible. From the very first moment I sat in a virtual racing car in iRacing using the Crystal Light, the differences in visual sharpness combined with the enhanced depth perception became immediately noticeable, especially when I swapped back and forth between the Crystal Light and the Quest 3. And for the purposes of this review, I was constantly switching between those two headsets. Of course, good-looking graphics isn't everything in the world of VR. It's most things, but it's not everything. And the Pimax Crystal Light is not all sunshine and smooth corners when it comes to using one. So in this video, I'll look at the wins and the trade-offs of transitioning from the Quest 3 to the Pimax Crystal Light. And at the end of this video, I will tell you which one I prefer the most. Lots to cover, so let's get on with it.
But this is only the beginning.
Setting up the Pimax Crystal Light. The Pimax Crystal Light is neither harder nor easier to set up than the Quest 3. You install the Pimax Play client, connect the headset to your GPU's DisplayPort, plug a USB 3 cable into your motherboard, and hook up the included power supply to the cable's dongle. I personally run the Pimax PSU into a switchable extension lead on my desk so I can turn it off when not in use. My first attempt at setting up the Pimax Crystal Light hit a snag with a persistent 10600 error in the Pimax software, which halted installation completely. The fix, which I found online, not in the Pimax FAQ, was to disable the onboard GPU in the BIOS of my system's mainboard. Once disabled, the Crystal Light connected instantly and has been running trouble-free ever since. With the headset connected, I can then fully explore the Pimax Play client software. Unlike Meta's scattered offerings, Pimax puts all the controls you will need inside one app. It's not the prettiest interface I've ever seen, but every important slider and option is easy enough to find and well labeled, with some helpful tooltips popping up to clear up any confusions you might be having. In the various tabs here, you can set refresh rate, render resolution, loads more. In fact, there are so many features in this app, I can't cover them all in this video as that would take too long. And instead, I will do a deeper dive just into this software in a separate video. That's really necessary because Pimax have just updated it with some really cool features. Once I've set the software to what I felt my system could cope with, the next step is fitting the headset to my head. I'm going to talk more about comfort in a later section of this video, but spoiler, the default strap and facial interface are better, much better than anyone on the internet may have led you to believe. From there, entering the Pimax VR environment is pretty straightforward. With the headset on, I'm greeted with the planetary home screen. Yes, this is a little cheesy and cannot be changed, far as I know, but you don't spend much time here, so it doesn't really matter. Anyway, from this planetary view, you can bring up the Pimax Play interface, which allows you to recenter your view, amongst other things, and also open a window to view your PC monitor. Handy for people like me who don't have a PC monitor on their actual sim rig. This interface is opened by pressing the Pi key on the controller, and then up it pops. To close it, just push this key again. However, if you ordered the Pimax Crystal Light without controllers, you can still access the interface by using the volume up and down switches, though you have to be careful because these are perilously close to the power button and you can accidentally turn it off. I've actually done that. Also note, in the Pimax Play version 1.41X, you now need to enable controllerless mode to use these shortcuts from the volume controls. Just check this box here, and also the tooltip here will give you a guide on what to do. Personally, I tend to keep the controllers on hand as I find the mouse cursor sometimes disappears in the VR view, or at least it does on my system. I do also have the same issue with my Quest 3, so perhaps this is just something unique to my setup. Comment below if you have seen this. One last thing to mention is the Crystal Light, similar to the Quest 3, uses a small rotating knob to adjust the IPD. Neither one is any easier or harder to use, but I do find the placement of the Crystal Light IPD adjustment dial just a little bit better, as the one on the Quest 3 can often be altered accidentally when putting on or taking off the headset. Either way, there is no auto adjustment of the IPD in either headset. In the end, whilst the Quest 3 setup is a little more fragmented because of Meta hiding various settings in the main app and the Oculus debug tool, the Crystal Light benefits from having everything in one place, and they don't push you for a Facebook account. Yes, the app from Pimax might not be the most glamorous you've ever seen, but it will get you into VR racing pretty quickly.
Sounds promising so far.
Image quality. Just a quick note here about the recordings that you're seeing on the screen here. They were captured with the OpenXR mirror in OBS, and they don't quite show as much as I would like the sharpness and the color and the deepness of the black. So just bear in mind, what you're seeing here on the screen isn't nearly as good as what I see in the Pimax Crystal Light headset. And that is very important because this is the category where the Quest 3 and the Pimax Crystal Light really differ from each other. Using the Quest 3, you're working with a PC VR image that's compressed before it reaches your eyes. Virtual Desktop with a Wi-Fi 6E router improves drastically on the graphics in terms of perceived quality if the bitrate is cranked up enough, but cranking up those settings can also cause performance problems. The Pimax Crystal Light, on the other hand, using a DisplayPort connection directly to your GPU, feeds that GPU's output directly to the headset. There's virtually no compression, so what you see is close to what your graphics card actually renders, and this creates a cleaner, sharper, more consistent image. A subjective opinion, I know, but for me, the ability to clearly spot a distant braking marker earlier or pick out the apex of a corner more precisely is a competitive advantage in sim racing, and the Pimax Crystal Light delivers this with greater image clarity and better depth perception. The larger aspheric lenses in the Crystal Light and the QLED panels are what deliver these wonderfully pin-sharp details. Distant apex cones, the tiny waving animation of a pit lane photographer, or the fine grain of the asphalt are all visually much cleaner and clearer than the Quest 3 with this higher pixel density count. I know the subject of mirror, the screen door effect, is often raised with VR headsets, but maybe it's because I started my VR journey with an Oculus CV1, or maybe it's because I just have older gamers' eyes, I don't know, but honestly, I haven't seen much mirror since I stopped using the Quest 2, and for me, both the Quest 3 and the Pimax Crystal Light have very little visible mirror. However, mirror is a very personal thing, so your view of the VR world in either headset may be different to mine. The QLED panels in the Pimax Crystal Light also show colors that are richer and more vibrant compared to the Quest 3's LCD panels, with curbs popping out their deeper reds, sponsor boards becoming readable even as I pass at full speed, and the paintwork of cars, usually passing me at speed, have this showroom gloss quality to them. Night racing also benefits from the QLED panels with deeper blacks. While not quite OLED level, they are far more convincing than the Quest 3's LCD grayer tones, giving night tracks a stronger sense of atmosphere without the surrounding grey fog you come to associate with the Quest 3. Although I probably still won't go night racing, as I find keeping the car on the track in the day challenging enough.
Big problems with that engine.
One problem I've seen with the Pimax Crystal Light that I haven't encountered with the Quest 3 is chromatic aberration, which you can see just here on the overlay of the OpenXR toolkit. However, I've only seen this on these overlays and not anywhere else whilst using iRacing, so for me it's not a massive problem, but it is something you should be aware of. Lastly, I just wanted to mention that over longer sessions, I've also noticed another subtle benefit, which is reduced eye strain. With the Pimax Crystal Light's sharper visuals and better depth perception, it just feels like my eyes don't have to work as hard to interpret the iRacing track and whatever drama is unfolding there. This leaves me feeling fresher after a longer race session, or even after a series of back-to-back races, 4 rookie races in a row, for example. In short, the Pimax Crystal Light doesn't just edge out the Quest 3 in image quality, it wins by a clear margin.
Clarity. Huh.
Performance. Of course, all that clarity and good stuff doesn't come without a performance hit to your computer, and in this section I'll look at one of the bigger trade-offs of moving from the Quest 3 to a Pimax Crystal Light. After visuals, performance is arguably one of the most important factors when sim racing using VR. A constant and stable frame rate can mean the difference between a clean corner or missing a braking point and ending up in the gravel, as I have found out to my own bitter disappointment. On the Quest 3, the PC VR titles are sent through a compressed pipeline. The PC renders each frame, encodes it, and streams it over USB or Wi-Fi to the headset. The Pimax Crystal Light works differently. It uses a DisplayPort connection for a direct, uncompressed feed from your GPU, meaning little to no compression artifacts and maximum clarity. The trade-off? Well, your PC now has to work that bit harder to push all those enhanced pixels to your headset, which means maintaining a stable FPS requires more muscle from either your GPU or your CPU, or possibly even both on an especially crowded iRacing session with lots of cars on the grid. And if you don't have an expensive GPU-CPU combination, that may have you scrambling to reduce graphical settings just to get a consistent FPS with the Pimax Crystal Light. With my i5 13600K and 4070 Super, I originally ran the Pimax Crystal Light at 72Hz just to keep the visuals smooth and consistent, and that worked fine. But in Season 3 of iRacing 2025, the MVP multi-view projection update dropped. MVP not only optimizes rendering for canted displays such as those found in the Pimax Crystal Light, but it also has a built-in native fixed foveated rendering that frees up some of the GPU resources without hurting clarity in your main focal area, at least not too much. I can now run the Pimax Crystal Light at 90Hz without making any compromises to the iRacing graphical tab, fully taking advantage of the Pimax Crystal Light's sharpness and clarity. I've got an entire video on the settings I now recommend for the Crystal Light when used with iRacing, which I will link below. Pimax Play also has its own fixed foveated rendering option inside the settings, but I found iRacing's native version much more efficient. At the end of the day, the Crystal Light is more demanding performance-wise than the Quest 3, either using the Quest with a cable or a Wi-Fi connection. So if you have a lower tier system, lower than say mine, and it's working fine with the Quest 3, don't assume the Crystal Light will also work fine. You might find your PC struggles with the Pimax Crystal Light, even with the new native fixed foveated feature inside iRacing. In summary, the better graphics of the Crystal Light simply need more power from your system. And if your PC doesn't have that, you may need to upgrade to see any of the benefits the Crystal Light offers over the Quest 3.
Complicated? What's complicated?
Field of view. Field of view in VR headsets is a hotly contested issue, and it's easy to understand why. The official stats list the FOV on the Crystal Light at 115 horizontal and 105 vertical, while official specs of the Quest 3 list it at 110 horizontal and 96 vertical. But here's the caveat. Measured real-world FOV often differs from the official numbers, and even user-measured tests can show wildly different results. This is partly due to how the headset sits on your face, or even how far the lenses are from your eyes, and of course, which measuring tool you are using to get those results. I attempted to measure both headsets with Test HMD, which is a very old tool, and to be honest, I kind of gave up as the results were just all over the place. That being said, the FOV for me personally in the Pimax Crystal Light does appear to be slightly better than that of the Quest 3, but this is a subjective feeling rather than something scientific. Similarly, there is also the subjective feeling of looking through a pair of diving goggles when I put on the Quest 3. It's pretty extreme for me, that feeling, but it's not so prevalent, the feeling of looking through diving goggles when I'm wearing the Pimax Crystal Light. So this one's difficult to call. I think really they're both very similar, the Pimax Crystal Light and the Quest 3. It's just really the facial interface and the headset that kind of creates an alteration. The only way really for you to personally tell is to put your face inside one and have a look and see which one you prefer.
Well, looks can be deceiving.
Comfort. Seated VR only. Let's keep things simple. When I say comfort, I am strictly talking about seated VR experiences. This is mostly because for me, the Pimax Crystal Light's cable is just a little too short for my particular setup. As I've mentioned in other videos, my PC is a long way away from my sim rig, and to get the cable of the Crystal Light from my PC to my sim rig, I need to tuck it under a carpet. This means if I wanted to do a standing VR experience with the Crystal Light, I would have to get that cable back out again. So, not wanting to do that, I don't. Plus, after enjoying wireless gameplay on the Quest 3 for fitness games and the like, I'm not eager to go back to a tethered experience. But since most of my PC VR time is spent seated in either sim driving or sim flying, or in Elite Dangerous flying in space, this restriction isn't an issue for me. But just bear in mind, when I am talking about comfort in this section, I'm only talking about the seated experience. When comparing the Quest 3 with the Crystal Light on paper, the Quest 3 is lighter at around 515 grams compared to the massively heavier Crystal Light at around 845 grams. However, this is with the Quest 3's lamentable stock strap, which pretty much everyone replaces. They have to. Often with a head strap that comes with a battery at the back, necessary, in my opinion, to counterbalance the Quest 3's front-heavy design. And if you add a battery-equipped strap to the Quest 3, for example, the Kiwi Design K4 Boost, which I have recently reviewed here, the total weight of the Quest 3 jumps to around 870 grams, making it slightly heavier than the Crystal Light with its stock strap. Now here's the thing. Out of the box, the Crystal Light uses a rigid head strap with a padded rear cradle. That means its weight is better distributed across your head from the get-go, making it feel more stable and secure once fitted. For me, I just needed to place my face in this first, then bring down and adjust the rear strap. After that, the headset was perfectly positioned and stayed in place fairly well with no mid-session fiddling required at all. Remember, I'm a seated experience. I think with this heavier head strap, if I was standing and moving around rapidly, I'm not so sure the Crystal Light would stay in place as well as the Quest 3. The Crystal Light's head strap is how a VR headset should be sold to the public, with a head strap that actually works. Meta, take note. The facial interface of the Crystal Light gets mixed reviews online, with some users immediately opting to replace the thinner material with something a bit thicker. Subjectively, I find this thinner facial interface fits my face nicely, and I am not feeling the need to replace it. So my advice to you is, if you do buy a Crystal Light, try using the stock facial interface first before ordering aftermarket upgrades. You might find you don't need them. One quirk with the Crystal Light facial interface is the nose gap. On the Quest 3, this is handy for peeking out of when you want to type or something like that, but on the Crystal Light, it's minimal to non-existent. If you rely on that feature, shall we call it, you will need to find a different way to peek out in the world using the Crystal Light. So overall, and remember, this is for the seated VR experience only, I find that while the Crystal Light is heavier than the Quest 3 with its rubber band stock strap, the weight difference becomes negligible when the head strap of the Quest 3 is inevitably upgraded to something that's actually usable. On top of that, I found the Crystal Light head strap and facial interface to be actually fairly comfortable right out of the box. There is plenty of adjustment to be had with this headset, and the thin facial interface still allows for plenty of room, even for somebody who has to put glasses inside their headset. All of this added together, I think the Pimax Crystal Light comes out on top in the area of comfort, but that's very subjective because there is a whole host of different types of accessories for the Quest 3 to make it comfortable, whereas there is only a limited amount of Crystal Light accessories to make your Crystal Light experience more comfortable. For me, I don't need those accessories, so I'm going to stick with what I've got, but you would have to try it and see how it feels for you.
Tomorrow you will learn by doing.
Audio. When it comes to audio in VR headsets, I'm focusing here purely on the stock built-in speakers, those small open-ear drivers on the arms of both the Crystal Light and the Quest 3. And also a quick disclaimer, I wear an over-the-ear hearing aid on my left ear due to reduced hearing in the ear, so my impressions in this section may differ from yours. Starting with the Quest 3, I find its built-in speakers deliver reasonably rich midtones and spatial cues accurate enough for racing. I can hear brake squeals and engine revs very clearly, which is essential for situational awareness on the track, especially when another car is right behind me. Audio on the Quest 3 is clean, free from distortion, and while the bass tones are on the lighter side, it hasn't held me back in the years I've been sim racing with this headset. The Crystal Light, in my experience, is overall a little quieter than the Quest 3. I describe it as not bad, but could be better. It still presents positional audio accurately enough for gameplay, but to my ears it sounds thinner than the Quest 3 with noticeably less bass presence. Pimax does offer an optional upgrade called the DMAS headphones, which reportedly deliver stronger bass and a more immersive sound detail overall. They use balanced mode radiator drivers, whatever those are, and mount directly to the headset. However, they weren't included with my review unit, so I can't comment on their real-world performance. Hopefully, I will be able to do that in a follow-up review in the future. If you do find the Crystal Light stock speakers underwhelming, there is a 3.5mm headphone jack tucked underneath the facial interface, letting you use your own headphones for audio, but this port location isn't the easiest to reach and it can be a bit fiddly to use. Microphone quality is another factor. I've never been especially impressed with the Quest 3's mic, but in my testing it's still a little bit better than the Crystal Light. Both are really not great microphones, but they will do the job in just game chatting, as long as you don't want to do anything beyond that. Streaming with these microphones, probably not going to happen. So for stock audio performance, the Quest 3 takes the win in my testing. The Crystal Light might redeem itself with DMAS upgrade, but since that's an additional purchase and currently untested in my hands, the Quest remains the better choice for out-of-the-box audio experience.
Hello. You'll have to speak up. I'm wearing a towel.
Tracking, controllers, and headset position. VR tracking has two key elements: accurate headset positioning in 3D space and precise controller tracking. If either slips, you risk missing a break point when your driver position jumps, or even worse, suddenly finding yourself outside your car. Watching your controllers vanish off into space can also be disappointing. Both the Quest 3 and the Crystal Light use inside-out tracking, with onboard cameras mapping the surroundings without using external sensors. For sim racing, where you are stationary and seated, head movement is often small and predictable in comparison to standing games, for example. And my experience with both headsets is they maintain positional stability extremely well, even in moderate to low light. However, I do know at least one user who has experienced issues with tracking using the Crystal Light. Reported causes for this that I have seen on the internet include poor lighting, reflections from monitors, particularly with glossy screens, or even a spinning ceiling fan. I personally have a separate light right in front of my rig, which I turn on most times I sim race, even during the day. But I don't know if this is why I get excellent and reliable tracking with the Crystal Light, or if I've just got lucky with this particular headset. It's difficult to know for sure. I can only tell you that my experience with the Crystal Light has been flawless with tracking. If you do have issues, Pimax also sells a faceplate which can improve tracking, but it's a costly upgrade, and you will also need to buy a steam lighthouse, at least one, for this faceplate to work. So it's probably worth adding more light to your play space just to see if that helps before spending money on additional hardware. For controller tracking, both headsets perform adequately for racing menus and setup screens. That said, I have noticed Crystal Light controllers can show slightly more jitter and lose position occasionally when my hands drop out of view. It's not a major problem in seated sims, but it could be frustrating if you're using these more active VR titles. As an aside, the Crystal Light controllers also have built-in rechargeable batteries that you charge via a USB-C port, whilst the Quest 3 controllers use replaceable AA's. At the end of the day, for me personally, in my play space, both headsets have offered solid tracking for sim racing and have given me very few issues, but for others, the Quest 3 has the cleaner track record and doesn't need expensive upgrade to solve any issues you might have with tracking. While we're talking about the cameras on the front of these headsets that are used for tracking, they are also used for pass-through. I haven't really talked much about the Crystal Light's pass-through capabilities because really it's so minimal. You remember how bad the Quest 2 was with its black and white grainy pass-through images? Well, that's pretty much what you get with the Crystal Light. It's good enough to maybe sort of locate where your keyboard is beside you, maybe. It's not going to be good enough to type on that keyboard, and it doesn't compare in any way, shape or form with the pass-through of the Quest 3.
It is what it is.
What's it like to use a Crystal Light with iRacing? So far, I've talked about all the things that people mostly talk about when reviewing anything at all on YouTube, specs and all that kind of stuff. But in this section, I want to talk about my personal take on what it's like to use the Crystal Light after years of using the Quest 3. And yes, this will be subjective, but that's the whole point. The first thing that jumps out at me when transitioning from Quest 3 to the Crystal Light is just how far I can see down the track, or really all around me, and how much of that image is in such clear focus inside the Crystal Light. This is of course due to those huge aspheric glass lenses of the Crystal Light combined with the QLED panels offering higher resolution and a greater pixel per degree than the Quest 3's LCD panels. In combination, the bigger lenses and the better panels of the Crystal Light simply create a cleaner, clearer and crisper image, better than the Quest 3. Of course, the Quest 3 also has good quality lenses offering edge-to-edge clarity, but the Quest 3's LCD panels are fed a compressed image, either via USB cable or via Wi-Fi, and the Crystal Light's superior QLED panels are fed a virtually uncompressed image via a direct port cable attached directly to the GPU. And yes, that all sounds like so much marketing speak from Pimax, doesn't it? I know that, but I can tell you honestly that the first time I put on a Crystal Light and loaded in an iRacing track, the very first thing I noticed straight away was the absence of that odd distance shimmering effect. You know the one, right? That shimmering around fences and on distant objects that we've all put up with for so long when using the Quest 3 with iRacing. In the Crystal Light, this shimmer is simply not there. The shimmer I'm referring to doesn't show up in video recordings or on any of the test footage I have made for this video. But if you've used the Quest 3 with iRacing, or really any sim racing title, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. This shimmer does tend to vary from track to track. Some tracks like Lime Rock have a lot of it. Others like Silverstone tend to have less. But it is generally always there. And it's always nagging at the edges of my perception and trying to become an annoying immersion breaker. It is something you kind of get used to, but it's also something you notice straight away every time you start a fresh VR session with the Quest 3. And then along comes the Crystal Light, and suddenly this shimmer is gone. I don't need to compromise anymore. This alazing shimmer, caused presumably by the lines or details that are too small for the headset resolution to resolve, or even the anti-alazing to handle cleanly, are magically removed by the Crystal Light's enhanced resolution and greater pixel per degree. And if all that flies straight over your head, all you really need to know is at the end of the day, the Crystal Light handles the image sent from iRacing better and cleaner, creating a crisp display that I just love to look at every time I put on this Pimax headset. Of course, all this adoration of mine isn't without a few dark clouds. The enhanced PPD and greater resolution mean my PC has to work just that much harder when in the iRacing world, which means poorly optimized tracks become an even greater problem. As a quick example, here is a GT4 AI race at Silverstone. As you can see, I'm getting my 90 FPS on a fairly consistent basis using the Crystal Light. However, if we now look at Spa with the same cars, the same race configuration, the same VR headset, the Crystal Light, suddenly my FPS is all over the place, sometimes dropping into the low 70s. When using the Quest 3, I would see this type of thing at Spa and Daytona and other tracks which lack sufficient optimization for VR users who are not rocking a 4090. I could often do something about that with the Quest 3 and largely mitigate the problems. But with the Crystal Light, tracks not cleanly optimized for VR require me to adjust the refresh rate down a notch to 72 Hz simply to maintain a steady and reliable FPS. It's not all tracks, I should stress. It's enough, though, to be an irritating problem for someone like me who likes to set and forget his refresh rate and his in-game settings, which means I have to remember to adjust things for different tracks. I know it's terrible, isn't it? And when I forget, the experience is less than amazing and kind of takes me back to the days of using the Quest 2. But I am willing to put up with all of this, mostly because the graphical quality and enhanced depth perception I get from the Crystal Light is just so much better than the Quest 3. Don't get me wrong, the Quest 3 is a great all-rounder VR headset and offers fantastic value for money. But in iRacing, the shimmer and the lack of long-range clarity are very noticeable, even more so for me now that I've spent time in the Crystal Light. The Quest 3 is certainly not unusable for iRacing, but in my personal experience of using the Quest 3 for years and the Crystal Light for a number of months now, the Crystal Light is just simply the better VR experience, albeit you do need a powerful computer to run it. So what's it like to use iRacing with the Crystal Light? It's a lot of fun, and I am really enjoying it.
What's your opinion?
Should you buy a Pimax Crystal Light for iRacing? The short answer to this is yes. But it's a qualified yes that requires you to honestly answer these three questions. Number one, is your computer powerful enough to handle the Crystal Light? By which I mean, is it powerful enough to cope with the greater demands of the Crystal Light compared to those of the Quest 3. Ideally, your system should either be somewhere in the middle of this chart, created by Pimax, or you should be prepared to upgrade your PC so that it ends up somewhere here, or preferably over there. I'm not saying that one of these systems on the left here won't run the Crystal Light, but I think the experience you will have trying to get these systems to work with the Crystal Light in iRacing is unlikely to bring sunshine and smiles to your life. Number 2, would you miss standing games? And this is aimed specifically at people who already have a Quest 3 and are thinking of getting the Crystal Light and perhaps need to sell the Quest 3 in order to afford the Crystal Light. If you can live without standing games, or at least live with using standing games while tethered to a cable that attaches the Crystal Light to your PC, remember this is not a particularly long cable, then sure, you should buy a Crystal Light. If not, the Quest 3 is perhaps where you should stay. Number 3, finally, can you afford it? This is a real meaty issue because to get the Quest 3 to work with iRacing to any degree of comfort, you will need to buy various upgrades to improve your Quest 3 out-of-the-box experience. But here's the thing, even after you've bought the Quest 3, and a new strap, which you really need, and a new facial interface, which you really need, and even a USB-C cable to connect your Quest 3 to the PC. There are other options, I know, but let's keep it simple for the moment. Even after you've bought all of these things for your Quest 3 to make it usable, you will have still spent less money than the cost of a stock Pimax Crystal Light. Yes, it's not a huge price difference we are talking about here, especially when we're in the world of sim racing equipment, when talking about price differences is almost sacrilege, but it is a difference in price that's worth mentioning. Pimax do make it easier by offering part payment deals, and they have special offers on all over the year and all of the time, which could drag the price of the Crystal Light down to somewhere closer to that of a Quest 3 that has been upgraded to the point of being usable. But of course, even if you could answer these 3 questions and still come up with Crystal Light as your answer, there is also the question of which headset fits your particular style of racing and other VR use. For me, the Quest 3 is a lighter, smaller headset than the Pimax Crystal Light. It's perhaps a more versatile headset that works brilliantly for wireless VR, fitness apps and standalone gaming, and all the time delivering a strong PC VR performance for seated sim racing. But on the other side of the coin, the Quest 3 is a lighter, smaller headset. And when I use it now, after several months of using the Crystal Light, the Quest 3 feels like a toy that's trying to be too many things at once. Whereas the Crystal Light has a solid, robust feel to it and a design that seems to be aimed at one specific function: PC VR. PC VR seems to be an area of virtual reality that Meta would rather wither and die on the vine, or at least Meta don't want to be too much involved with it, particularly as they go chasing that Horizons world that I personally have so little interest in. At the end of the day, the Crystal Light is built for PC VR first, and that counts for a lot for someone like me who really spends most of his VR time racing or flying or in space. In those situations, image quality, reduced latency, and ease of connection is always going to be more important to me than anything that the Quest 3 can offer in standalone capabilities. And the Crystal Light delivers all of those areas. So I would say that if your entire VR world is inside sim racing or flight simulators or other seated experiences, and you're okay with being tethered while seated, the Crystal Light is pretty much purpose-built for the job and well-suited to your needs. Ultimately, though, this isn't about crowning a single winner in the VR arena of life. It's about finding the right headset for your VR racing lifestyle. And for me, that is the Crystal Light. I think this is my way forward into my future VR experiences. Although I do feel that at some point I'm going to have to upgrade my PC in order to realize the full potential of the Pimax Crystal Light. If you are interested in buying a Crystal Light, there will be a flash sale this Sunday, the 24th of August 2025 from 5 to 11 p.m. UTC time. And during that time, you will get an exclusive 10% off the price. I should also mention that Pimax offer a cross-grade incentive where you don't actually need to send your headset to them. You just email them proof of purchase and they give you a discount. Basically, there are discounts happening a lot in the Pimax universe, and to check out the ones I've just mentioned, you will find links to them below in the description. What's your decision? Quest 3, Pimax Crystal Light. Let me know in the comments below which way you're going to jump. So that was a very long video, wasn't it? And if you're still here at the very end, drop a comment below and we can have a laugh about how long this video is. My apologies if I sound a little croaky in this video. I have just recovered from a cold and a sore throat, which slowed down the production of this video much more than I wanted it to. So thank you again for watching all the way through. And in the meantime, I hope you found this video helpful. And until the next one, drive clean and I will see you on track. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click the like button, and if you haven't already done so, subscribe. Click the little bell icon if you want to be notified of any future videos.